Hey everybody, this is PJ Riley from Lancaster Archery out here at the Eastern Traditional Archery Rendezvous. I'm here with TradTech and Lancaster Archery's John Wert. We're going to talk to you today about different kinds of traditional bows. We're going to start here with a unique one. John, what kind of bow is this?
This is a U self bow, PJ. Self bow is the very most primitive style of bow that exists. It's made from one single piece of wood. This bow in particular is yew wood. Yew is a classic self bow wood. It was used in English longbows and many prehistoric style bows. The first bows ever built by man, many of them were built out of yew. This is a beautiful self bow that was done by Stim Wilcox. We don't carry anything like this at Lancaster Archery. It's a unique craft and design of bow, and there are many custom bowyers who build pieces of art really like this bow, but it's very functional. This is a 55-pound, 72-inch self bow. This is a excellent, accurate shooting bow made from just one simple piece of yew. Beautiful example of a self bow, and we're lucky that we got to borrow this for this video. I'm going to pass this off very quickly, but we have to thank George for letting us borrow his yew self bow. Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
There's two main categories of traditional bows. Those are recurve bows and longbows. Within the longbow category, I would say there's two distinctions or two subcategories, which is a classic style longbow and a modern longbow. So let's start with a classic longbow.
Sure.
A classic longbow is like this Bear Montana. A Bear Montana is what most people think of, or this profile and design is what most people think of when they think of a longbow. This is a fiberglass laminated bow, so it has black fiberglass on the back, black fiberglass on the belly, and maple through the cores. And what makes a longbow significantly different than a recurve is a couple of things. A longbow typically has a very narrow or narrow limb cross section, but it's deeper or thicker than a recurve limb. A recurve limb tends to be wider in the cross section, but deeper in the stack or in the laminations. So a longbow is thin, narrow, and longer than a recurve bow. The other main distinction is when the real distinction between a recurve bow and a longbow is a longbow string comes out of the cut or the string groove and makes no contact with the limb outside of the string groove. A recurve bow has some contact with the limb outside of that string groove. So the main distinction, and even the distinction for tournament archery, to classify yourself as a longbow shooter or a recurve shooter, is whether the string touches the limb outside of that groove. So that's a difference between that and a recurve, and the shape of the limb is a difference between a recurve and a longbow. This is a Fedora Viking. This is what I would call a modern longbow. This is a one-piece version. A Viking has a limb profile, as you can see, that does not continuously curve or arc towards the tip. It starts to curve here, but then it flattens out, and it almost has a slight recurve going into the limb tip. This limb is quite a bit wider and flatter, almost like a recurve bow. So this is a one-piece modern longbow. Typically have a little bit longer handle section and a little bit more articulated grip, I would say, like a recurve bow. Yeah. Longbows, some people call them broom-style grips or baseball handle-style grips because they're straight, not much cut or shape to fit your hand. Sure. This has a really shaped grip, made a lot like a recurve bow riser would be made.
So for somebody shooting these, just sticking with the longbows, the two different types, what are they going to notice the differences between the classic and the modern longbow?
That's a really good question. Longbows have what we call hand shock, and a lot of people describe it in different ways, but that narrow, heavy limb with a deeper limb profile tends to have some more vibration left in it after the shot, and it can really give you a good thump. Some people call it recoil like a shotgun, but some of these traditional longbows can really shake your hand when you're done. That's called hand shock. Some guys like it, some guys don't. But what you'll find is modern longbows tend to reduce the hand shock because their limb is more like a recurve bow limb, flatter and wider and shorter, they tend to have less hand shock than traditional or classic longbows.
Well, as long as we're talking about recurves, or we still got another longbow.
One more distinction is simply this is a modern longbow in a takedown version.
Right.
So this is a three-piece modern longbow. This is a Black Hunter cloud bow. It's a new bow at Lancaster Archery. We're just started to get these in. These have the modern longbow limb profile.
Yeah.
It's flatter and wider, but it's got a three-piece takedown system, so you can take the limbs off of this and exchange it for other limbs of different weights.
Right.
But this is a modern longbow three-piece. This is a modern longbow one-piece.
Gotcha. Great. So I'm guessing recurves are next.
Recurves are next. Recurve bows have a few distinct categories or subcategories as well. The classic recurve that a lot of us think about is a bear archery recurve like the Grizzly. This is a bear Grizzly. It is a classic one-piece recurve bow built with a very articulated riser section, so it's got that pistol grip. It's obviously a bigger, more massive riser than the longbow risers we were looking at, so that's a clear distinction you see right away separating longbows and recurves. The most important distinction between a longbow and recurve is the recurve limb tip. On a recurve bow, the string comes out of the string grooves and for about 4 or 5 inches makes contact with the limb until the string at the end of the recurve section breaks away from the limb and continues towards the other limb tip. You can also see that the limb is much wider than a longbow limb, but thinner through the cross section or flatter.
And now, while we got the one piece here, one of the things about the one piece is, what weight is this one?
This one is a 45-pound Grizzly.
So 45 pounds. So this one, that's going to be what the weight is. There's no way to adjust that. It's 45 pounds.
Exactly. Unless you want to take a wood rasp and some sandpaper and remove some of this limb, you're not changing the weight of this limb.
Gotcha.
And that's an important distinction. So a lot of guys prefer, or a lot of archers prefer, this traditional one-piece recurve. It harkens back to the classic bear archery of the 50s and 60s, and a very popular style traditional bow that you'll see here this weekend.
Sure.
Moving forward, though, the next most popular style of recurve bow is a three-piece takedown recurve bow.
Let's see that.
This is a Samick Sage Deluxe. Three-piece, obviously it's the riser section and 2 bolt-on limbs. These limbs are bolted on with a screw and a bezel here that threads into an insert that's in the riser. There's also a locator pin behind this limb so that there's 2 points of contact, making this limb really rock solid once it's been bolted to the riser. This limb, because you can take them off, allows you to change the weight of the limb. So this is another 45-pound bow, and I can get 40-pound limbs up to 60-pound limbs for this bow, and as low as 30, I think, is the lightest weight for this particular bow. But once again, it's a recurve bow. It has a very sculpted riser section, much more massive than a longbow through the handle section. Limb tips are wide and flat, and you've got a recurve limb tip. Very popular bow. I would say the three-piece recurve and the one-piece recurve here at something like Denton Hill are the most popular, or the bows you'll come across most often in the hands of the archers out here.
Gotcha. All right, what's the last one we got here?
Finally, I've got a distinct style of three-piece recurve. This is an ILF recurve bow. And as you know, Lancaster Archery and TradTech Archery, one of our specialties is the TradTech line of ILF recurve bows.
ILF being?
ILF stands for International Limb Fitting. The International Limb Fitting is a limb connection system that was developed almost 30 years ago, and it's been used in modern tournament-style recurve bows for that entire time. Hunting bows have been, or many people have been manufacturing these for traditional archers and bow hunters for about 10 years. Bringing this modern recurve limb connection to the traditional archery world.
Gotcha. And what are the benefits of that type of limb fitting?
What makes this limb and limb connection system distinct from the other three-piece recurve we just talked about is it's a dynamic system. These limb bolts are adjustable, so we can turn this bolt in towards the riser, or we can back it out away from the riser. And what that does is it loads the limb. And so I can increase the draw weight on this bow or decrease the draw weight on this bow.
Gotcha.
I can also balance the bow in different ways. When an archer shoots a bow, they often shoot with a distinct finger hook on the string. Sometimes we shoot with one finger above the arrow or two fingers below. Sometimes we shoot with all three fingers under. And where our fingers meet the string in relationship to how the bow has been designed require a different balance of the limbs. So when I shoot with all three fingers under the bow, I'm going to change the tiller by adjusting one limb bolt in and one limb bolt out to balance the limbs specifically for how I hook that string. So it allows you to tune for the archer. It also allows you to tune the draw weight by almost 10%. If this is a set of 50-pound limbs, they can be adjusted up to about 54, almost 55 pounds at max weight. And they're really easy to take down. So that's one of the other advantages of this system is once you're done using the bow, I'll demonstrate for you. The limbs are easily removed from the riser with just a little pressure, pulling the limb, sliding the limb out of the pocket. And if you look here, you can see the pocket and you can see the bolt that's adjustable up or down off the surface of the pocket to change the draw weight and to change the tiller of the bow.
Now that looks pretty modern. That's still going to fit in the traditional world? It's still accepted?
The aesthetic, or what we value as traditional archers, is simplicity. So a lot of us choose to shoot bows like this because we appreciate the aesthetic of simplicity. So a lot of archers at first, when they see this type of limb connection, maybe it doesn't appeal to them. But many of the archers here at Denton Hill and many of my customers learn that the attachment system is actually pretty simple. It's not very high tech. It's also very easy to use and reliable, but it gives them a lot of options.
Sure.
So when it increases their options and increases their ability to have fun with their bow, they learn to appreciate it. But you're right. Some of my customers question modern technology merging with traditional archery, but when they shoot the bow, they find that it's just like their longbows and recurves that they've been shooting for years.
There's a rundown of traditional bows. If you got any questions or you want to see some of these bows, you can check us out at lancasterarchery.com.